Hi, everyone. This is Serena, founder and director of Breaking Taboo. Today, I'm sitting here with Matt Dempsey, who's a multicultural counselor and psychotherapist. Hi, Matt. How are you
Hi,
today?
Serena. I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. First of all, tell me, okay, define psychotherapist. What, for all those who don't know, there's a lot of different types of therapies. So,
Yeah. There's
so
so
first of all, what is
y-
psychotherapy?
what is psychotherapy? It's a popular question. Psychotherapy is really just kind of the broad umbrella term for what you would think of with talk therapy, kind of just like coming in, speaking for about 45 minutes to an hour to somebody, generally once a week or however frequently, and just being able to talk about what's going on in your life, stresses, issues that are coming up in relationships, all that kind of stuff. So that's psychotherapy. There's all these different kinds of specific, certifications and licenses and things like that that help people be a psychotherapist, but in a general sense, it's talk therapy.
Is there a lot of Sigmund Freud type, like Freudian psycho, because he's the father of psychoanalysis,
He
so,
is, yeah. So psychoanalysis,
or
it's
we
kind of
call him the
its
father of
the
psychology,
father of
actually. Yeah.
psychology,
Mhm.
Sigmund Freud. That's right. So he is, uh, kind of spearheaded what's kind of more of like modern day psychoanalysis, right? And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of that's out there, but that's just kind of I would say one branch of psychotherapy. That it's not always necessarily that. I would say personally, though, I mean, probably one of the things that I take the most from that kind of work, especially kind of the psychodynamic work, is just understanding about how the earliest relationships in our, it sounds so cliche, but like the earliest relationships in our lives really do set the tone for so much of the other relationships that we have in our lives.
Right.
So giving that context. But I'm not a psychoanalyst where, you come in 3 times a week and you lay down and you just kind of free associate and talk the whole time and we're dredging up all mommy and daddy issues. I'm like, that's not me.
That's
But there's
not you.
that's
Okay.
not me. There's a flavor of family stuff in there, but that's about it.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I know that you are a multicultural
I
counselor. So
am.
what is that? And what's the difference between that and
I know,
psychotherapy?
I know. So a lot of people are curious about that. So, multiculturalism, especially within psychotherapy, is just basically understanding that we live in like a multicultural world, right? Especially in a multicultural country. So there's a lot of diversity, and with that, then means that we all have a variety of cultural identities, right? So for me, I'm a young, white, gay, cis man, able-bodied. So those are some of kind of like what we call my salient identities, kind of the more significant ones.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like the interaction of all those different identities and all the cultural experiences that I've had with those identities, both marginalized and also of privilege, that makes me understand or kind of creates the beliefs that I have for myself, about myself, and then informs how I move through the world.
Mm-hmm.
So when we become more conscious of how those cultural experiences affect us, then we
Mm-hmm.
can start to challenge some of the negative and irrational thinking and be able to elevate ourselves and achieve more of what we want and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of that's what I would say kind of dominates the therapy I do. It's not singularly that. I'm kind of eclectic and pull from a few
Mm-hmm.
different backdrops of therapy. But yeah, that's what multiculturalism is.
Okay. So, how much does that actually come into play, your multicultural training and issues like when you're actually dealing with your clients?
Yeah, I would say pretty regularly. But
Okay.
also, I mean, this is kind of I tend to work kind of mostly with gay men. That's just kind of like the
Hmm.
content that I put out. Honestly, just because I'm a gay guy, and so it's actually like kind of the only marginalized experience I have. So I'm always curious about how much that has affected me. So I've put a lot of content out there speaking to that experience as being gay, growing up gay. And so as
Right.
a result, I'm getting a lot of gay clients, like a lot of gay male clients.
Right. Well, you could
Um,
probably relate, you can probably relate
oh,
better to your clients
for
and
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
totally. So it comes up a lot, in a way that I'm helping my clients understand, how that experience and, being marginalized in that way can shape us far more negatively than we even realize. Like
Right.
as an example, growing up gay, you kind of think like, oh yeah, sure, I grew up gay, I was bullied, made to feel like I was less than somehow, but I came out of the closet and now I'm fine, right? And it's
Hmm.
like, oh, okay, not exactly. Let's start to understand there's kind of like this next level, right? About the nuanced ways that shame can come up in our lives and make us feel like we're not enough. I'm obviously
Mm.
talking about the experience of being gay, but it can be for any kind of marginalized identity.
Oh, actually, yeah. Even I can relate as
Totally,
growing
yeah.
up
Exactly.
Asian American
People of
and
color, right?
hmm
Racism has an effect on us.
hmm
So those kinds of things
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
There are always things that people don't really talk about, but they think it's in the back of their minds, or it's their experiences from childhood, with
Yeah.
a prejudice or something that, like, yeah, it definitely has an effect, I think, and it's important to speak out about this stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, I know that mental health, and particularly the subject of suicide. So we're getting a little heavy here,
Yes.
but
Go
yeah,
for it. Let's do it.
obviously,
This is real.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So um, so suicide definitely has a huge effect in the gay population.
Yeah.
There's a lot of suicidality, suicide cases, and
Yeah.
would you say? I mean, obviously there's a whole fitting into society and the prejudice and things that really has a profound effect, and the bullying that
Yes.
people don't even think about, but those have a profound effect on a person's mental and emotional well-being for the
Yeah.
rest of their lives.
Hmm.
Would you say that's like mostly the reason why, or like from your experience, why do you think, and also if you could educate us a little bit on the statistics of suicide and mental health in the gay
Totally. Yeah.
population?
Okay. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not your stats guy, so I'm not
Mhm.
going to be pulling from very concrete statistics, but I will tell you that it's a disproportionately higher rate of
Uh-huh.
suicidality amongst, gay people, queer people, things
Right.
like that. So, and it really has so much to do with not just the kind of overt and explicit forms of homophobia and bullying, things that you think of, right?
Mhm.
So kind of like picking on people, beating queer people up, or anything like that. That obviously can be some of the most significant ways that can have a negative effect on how we feel about ourselves, and then how we kind of move through the world. But it's so much of these kind of nuanced experiences, the kind of more subtle forms of homophobia that exist out
Like
there,
what?
ways that, I mean, just the fact that, looking at the kind of, movies and TV and other content that's out there is dominated by, kind of heterosexism and straight people and straight relationships, and any gay
Mhm.
characters even are just kind of more of like an offshoot. It's not really things that kind of take center stage as
That is so
regularly.
interesting. I have the same experience being Asian American.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I
So
literally, I mean, I watch movies and TV, and I'm always like, I think I was just watching a recent one, Cursed, and I was like, oh, this is
mhm.
really great. There's so many multicultural things
Yeah.
here, and they do address being gay. There are gay characters leading one of the
Yeah.
leading females is gay, and I was like, this is really great. King Arthur is black. Like I love this show, but then I was like, wait a second, why are there no Asians in here? And then why are the only two
Wow.
Asians, like, why are they weird green people, like hiding the color of their skin? And it's just like, why
Yeah.
are they so weird and like odd, and they don't even really have like a human role?
Totally. Yeah.
So that is so interesting.
Yeah, it's all of those subtle messages, right? And
Right.
again, I'm kind of talking specifically about like through the gay lens, but it's really every marginalized identity, right? So like what you're talking about with kind of the Asian population, I'm talking about the gay population, but I mean really anything that's kind of not like set as like the societal standard or no or norm, that kind of like gold star, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of it's like interesting because when you think about like what that even is, like who has like the absolute most privilege, you
Yeah,
would
who?
probably, yeah, I would probably say it would be a young, straight, cis male who's able-bodied. And did I cover most of them? I think those are the big ones. So like that person is living in privilege, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but so anything that kind of diverges from that, then, right? Like anything that's an offshoot or is marginalized through those
Mm.
cultural identities and experiences, then it's like, yeah, like it messes with you, you know. And so it messes with you again, not even just in some of the most obvious ways, but the subtle ways, the kind of nuanced ways that happens. So it's all that societal messaging that tells you that you're not enough, and that influences how we feel about ourselves. So that's why we have to start paying attention to that and be aware of it.
Interesting. So do you experience that a lot, like in your clients? Do people come to you with feelings of not being enough?
Oh
And
my God, yes. I can guarantee any person that comes through my door, any person, I can tell you exactly how that goes right back to a sense of not being enough.
oh
That it's
wow.
shame, that it's an issue of self-esteem. You give me any problem, I'll tell you exactly how it comes down to that.
Wow. I mean, I discovered in my own therapy actually that my that that growing up, that was the message that I was told, but not necessarily through society, through my culture, through my parents.
Like how so?
Okay, so in the Asian culture, parents are very, very strict and very much like, oh, go to Ivy Leagues, go do this. Like there's a standard, there's like a straight line that you're supposed to walk, you know, and it's very, I know it's very stereotypical, but you know, that was very much my stereotypical life growing up. And, you know, and it was very much a straight non-creative path that I, you know, fought kind of my entire life. So sometimes I do wonder with the multicultural thing too, how much of this is because of culture, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
How much of what is culture? What you just said?
Yeah. No, I mean, like how much of, for example, you were talking about measuring up. So these nuances, you know, these are all nuances, right? So measuring up, being good enough, whatever. I had come to believe, and this is the first time I'm hearing with you, that it's because of something such as race for me, you know, for me, for you, it's because you're gay. And for me, it's because of my race. And when I was younger, you know, the things that I experienced might have later on affected me as a society, being like Asian American in America. That's what you're saying. But I actually thought that it was because of growing up within my race. Within my culture.
So I would say, so, you know, I think when people say culture, you kind of think about it like on a societal kind of national level, right? But culture just really just kind of means like the kind of whatever are a set of standards or norms within a group. And so, so if you're talking about, you know, in your family, that's the culture of your family. If you're talking about in the Asian community, it's the culture of the Asian community. If you're talking about, say, something like, you know, the US, then that's going to be the culture of a nation, right? And so, so there's kind of all these varying levels of culture, but it's taking into account kind of all of that when, you know, kind of outside of us as individuals, how we then can, you know, compare and contrast ourselves and what we view as our worth, you know, depending on what a certain culture or a group is suggesting is a gold standard and where we fall in line because of that. So so that's what I mean when I say culture. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, absolutely. Because there can be many different types of culture for every individual that they grow up in, whatever is basically, you're saying like the norm of what they have experienced growing up. Right.
Yeah.
So let's take that to be the privileged culture. Okay, so would it be something like the stereotypical privileged white male, higher socioeconomic, you know, in America, and if they were, say, to rebel and not, I don't know, like go want to be a rapper or something, do you think that would be the deviant from the norm and what they have to deal with? I mean, what types? Yeah.
So I would say it's not necessarily there's a need to kind of deviate from a norm or a standard per se. I think that it becomes all of our responsibility in the sense of our own mental health and well-being to be able to understand the cultural experiences that we have. So for somebody, I'll use myself as an example. Aside from being gay, I'm entirely privileged, right? So
what are some of the challenges that an entirely privileged person might go through?
Some of the challenges is that, you know, I mean, you kind of, I mean, first of all, it's not to say that you're still not just going to have challenges in life. I mean, there's still everyday kind of normal struggles, you know, that can come up. So these things are going to happen. But being particularly aware of even how a privileged experience can mess with your sense of worth in an authentic way, right? So if I'm kind of being hit from every single angle with the world around me telling me that just who I am is automatically enough and automatically okay, then I'm assuming that everything that just is external to me is what makes me valuable, and it's not. And so it can make it challenging for me to have a sense of what my actual legitimate authentic worth is, in a way that can help support me exploring, you know, just kind of more the interests and the passions that I have, and, you know, putting the effort into expressing my heart and things like that in a way that continues to elevate my sense of self and, you know, connect with other people in more meaningful ways. Because otherwise, then again, if I'm just like entirely privileged, I might have all this messaging that says, I don't really need to do anything. Like the world is just going to be handed to me on a silver platter. And so then I'm not participating in my own life. And then I wonder why I'm not connecting with people in more meaningful ways. I get resentful of people for not, showing up how I want them to when that's not happening. So even in the most privileged of experiences, there still can be challenges that can come up. So it's about just recognizing that, deconstructing that, and participating in a more conscious multicultural society and just life.
Right, absolutely. Instead of falling into the stereotypes, becoming more aware of your own individuality and your own identity and what makes you happy. Yeah, so I think it's also interesting because, I do know people of the quote privileged stereotype, and they have their own set of challenges in battling that stereotype from the outside world as well, because some people just look at them and automatically think that, oh, what do you know? You're just like this privileged, a-hole, and and they're constantly battling that too. So I've seen it from the other side as well, where they don't feel like they're enough because they don't have something that is unique or special or outside of
right. Yeah.
So very interesting. Yeah. So, okay. So, back to what you, sorry, we're like going on a whole tangent.
That's okay. I love it. And isn't that just life? So messy and all over the place.
Right. Well, that's breaking taboo on a variety of all different topics. Yeah, absolutely. So, so what are some of the taboos that you come across in dealing with your typical clientele that people are afraid to talk about, that you see as a common problem?
Oh, wow. Taboos. It's interesting that you've been framed it that way, because I haven't necessarily thought about it in that context specifically. But I guess I would say that, especially in my practice, so with the clients that I work with, like, as I said, it tends to be dominated by gay men specifically, gay cis men specifically. And so I think the thing that comes up a lot is just it can be particularly difficult to tap into the emotion of things. And I think that that's probably common for a lot of people, but especially for men, and especially for gay men that grow up in a world that says, if you're a man, then you have to be manly in these specific ways, the kind of traditional sense of like masculinity and macho, and that's what you have to be, and that does not include expressing emotion or even identifying that you have a lot of emotion, right? Because that would be viewed as too kind of feminine, right? And so as a gay man, then there's this tendency, or this kind of what feels to be a need, to have to overcompensate and be even that much more kind of macho and not sissy and I think a lot of this is starting to change, but especially with a lot of the clients that I work with, I mean, we grew up in a world that really kind of pushed that idea and that message that you have to be more of a man. So it makes it very difficult to tap into the fact that I need love and I feel lonely and I get sad and I'm like really scared about my ability to connect with other people, or to, have a more fulfilling life, or that people even see me or care about me, or, it's all that kind of stuff that we don't want to not even just admit, but even own ourselves, right? And so there's just kind of a disconnect. So I would say that's probably the taboo, which is, yes, I have shame and I have fear, and these are things that actually, kind of push me around a little bit, and it's difficult to acknowledge that.
So how do you typically deal with that? What would your advice be for others out there who are dealing with that?
I mean, the way that I deal with it is I just get vulnerable myself, like I'll talk about my own fears, I think that people want experience over advice. So just getting to model what some of these things look like, and for me to get to talk about like the fear that, I'm not enough, and I'm not doing enough or performing enough, or I don't make enough money, or, I don't have enough kind of content that I'm putting out there so that people can know that I'm hustling and working hard and that I deserve things. Like, that's some of the stuff that comes up for me that I'm constantly having to check in on. Those are real fears that come up, like even today, thinking about like, oh man, I haven't made a video since like last week. Man, I really need to like put something out there. Like, oh, people are going to unfollow me. They're not going to care anymore.
You can put this out there.
I'll put this out there. Great. Okay, good. So that's one way, right? Being more productive. Right. But the other way too is also just checking in on where these expectations are coming from. And these expectations to have to overshoot and overperform come from a belief that I'm not enough at a baseline, right? And so instead of just trying to hustle and push myself even more, I can also just check in with myself about how much I'm telling myself this bullshit narrative, so that I can actually rewrite the story myself.
Right. So where is that coming from for you?
A big part of it is just growing up gay, for sure. So like growing up and, and
I'm being told that that wasn't manly and
Yeah, just growing up and just knowing, like, if you're gay, you're not enough. If you're gay, there's something wrong with you. You should be ashamed of it. I mean, I remember like wishing I wasn't gay when I was younger. I remember I was probably maybe about 14 or 15 years old. And this is just one story as an example, but 14 or 15 years old. And I was at this lakeside resort that I went to with my family every summer. And, we're there and everybody's having a great time and having fun and whatever. And I just remember that's like when I was really starting to confront it, right? Like, I might be gay and I can't stop thinking about it. And I would see like the lifeguards at this lake in their like cute, tight red shorts, the guys, like, I feel so tortured. I'm so attracted to them. But I felt such shame. And it got dark. Like it would get dark for me. And so it's just like, wow, just being who I am. Just being exactly and existing exactly as I am makes me feel such dirty, dark shame and depression. So that lingers. And even after I got to a point where a couple of years after that, I, finally came out and I started living my life openly and was out to everybody and had a lot of support around me. Even in the best case scenario where that happens, right? I'm very fortunate, had a lot of support, including my family and parents. Even that, it's still has a negative effect on me, to just see, for the longest I wasn't even able to get married to another man, like that wasn't even an option, so it's like when the government doesn't even view you as a whole human being with equal rights, how are you supposed to acknowledge that yourself? So that's a difficult task, and I think that it's achievable, and that's where the work lies, but that's where it comes from.
I think that is so interesting because I'm not as familiar, obviously, as you are with the gay community, but I am somewhat familiar because I used to teach anti-prejudice courses, and and I am somewhat familiar with a multiculturalism as a whole. But I also have a lot of friends who are Black from the Black community, and a lot of the things you just said really resonated with me, with like what I hear from them with their experiences, with feeling like and I'm sure with any society that is of a minority in America. I mean, I'm sure the Asian community feels this as well, Latinx, but what you just said about feeling like being yourself is not enough, like that there's something dirty or wrong with you or not right just because you are the way you are, because you are of Black skin or you're gay or Asian skin or whatever. So that is just so interesting. So I mean, how do you think we can work on, and I know there's no right answer, but if we were to brainstorm, what are some ways that we can work on changing this, on, turning this, seeing, and I know it's a big issue, especially nowadays, and people are trying, but are they doing the right things? Are they trying it in the right ways? For example, my example with the show Curse, it's just like, they're trying, but, you still miss some stuff.
You're missing the mark, but you're trying, right? That's what I mean, listen, that's just the human experiences. We're never going to do anything perfectly. And so I think, it's a very large question with a whole lot of kind of long nuanced kind of answers to it. But I guess maybe what I could say, in short, at least, is in a collective way, I think there's so much of that that has been going on and continues to go on, of course, right now, especially with everything that happened with George Floyd and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, kind of even more than it had been. All of these things are really, really, really kind of present for us now, which is wildly challenging and uncomfortable and conflicting, but also really incredible opportunities for us to be able to dig even deeper than we have before. And that's what we need to do. It's not just about, kind of passing, legislation to make sure that everybody has, like, quote unquote, equal rights. It's about understanding how there is so much discrimination that continues to go on, how much there's so much, implicit bias and latent, racism or homophobia or xenophobia or misogyny or ableism or ageism or all these things, to be able to really unpack a lot of these kind of nuanced multicultural identities and become aware of all of these things so that we then can start, kind of doing the work that we need to do. But I mean, I think so collectively, that's what we need to do. And I think that's amazing. I'm actually reading this book, Cast, right now. It's one of Oprah's book club picks that she just picked. And it's so good. It's so good. It's talking specifically not just about racism, but about the caste system. And it really kind of breaks things down. It's not kind of like a drum beating rah rah about racism, that kind of more emotionally influenced perspective on things. It really dives into kind of like the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of a caste system and about how like the history that we've had in our country and how that plays out, but then also about how these things affect us as individuals. So I would say on an individual level, being able to understand how we're a part of our society and how we ourselves have been influenced and how we have all of our own, both marginalized and privileged identities and experiences to own and to be able to understand without over-identifying with those things, right? So that we don't get defensive about it. But
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that was beautiful. That was absolutely beautiful what you just said. And I think you just hit something very interesting at the end there where you said without over identifying. But I mean, we are who we are and we do have to identify with that and honor it and honor our backgrounds and our roots and who we are, like everything that makes us as individuals. But then where is the over identifying? Like where do you draw that line?
Well, I mean, I would say even in the most basic kind of psychological sense, our thinking, our feelings, our actions, right? It's like the ABCs of psychology: our affect, our feelings, our behavior, and then our cognitions, our thinking. So it's kind of those three main components of our psychology that obviously as human beings we all have, or we all do, but that's not the heart of who we are necessarily, right? Like I am not my thinking. I am not my feelings. I am not the actions that I do. I'm accountable and responsible for those things, but I'm not those things. That's not my identity. And so I think that that's a really important thing to be able to help, create some space between who I am and those things. That way I'm not I identify with them, but I don't over-identify. And when I don't over-identify with them, then that means that they're malleable. That means that I can start to make some changes. If I over-identify with these things, then I'll never let them go because I'll feel like I'm forfeiting who I am. And we don't want to ever do that as humans. So giving ourselves that space gives us an opportunity to make positive change.
So then if we aren't, because I'm just thinking, and this is just me playing devil's advocate, but how there's there's a school of thought where it's what Shakespeare said, we are what we think you are, right? And then there's school of thought, you are what you do. So if we're not those things, if we're not our behaviors, our cognition, and our actions, like what are we?
Oh my God, so existential.
Yes, I am.
Who am
existential.
I?
Yes, definitely.
No, listen, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know that I have a really definitive, concrete answer for that either. And I mean, in kind of the most spiritual or creative way.
Your clients with I'm sure a lot of them come in with identity issues, right? And who am I?
Yes.
Now I have this identity of being gay and trying to figure out where I am in this world.
Yeah.
So what do you tell them? How do they figure that out?
I mean, listen, I would just say, I just think that we are our hearts, right? Like, it's just kind of like the pure essence of love. I think that that's the root of who we are. And so however you want to think about that, if it's in the spiritual way, if it's just kind of like an energy thing or whatever, I would just say that to me, that's what it's all about. It's just kind of like the pure essence of love. I would also say that I think you can probably boil down every single decision that we make in life where it comes from a place of love or fear, right? And I think fear is a very kind of human experience. It's something that's just kind of a part of us as human beings, but the essence of who we are. So this is kind of teetering now in a spiritual way, and I try not to necessarily infuse that in psychology, but this is my perspective that's kind of just that the pure energy of life, of love, right? The thing that continues us on. That's what I would say who we are. All the rest of it is just kind of part of that human experience, our thinking, the feelings that come up for us, and also the actions that we, choose, that these are a part of the human experience and we can identify with them. And it's a combination of a variety of things that help us have some concept of our human place in this, on this earth. But the essence of us, I think, is just kind of love.
Beautiful. And that, and we can get all really philosophical with that one too, because, I've done,
for sure.
Psychology has quite a lot of research, fascinating research on love. And that's something for a future episode. It'd be great to get a love psychologist on.
Yeah.
But, I mean, in speaking about the identity and identity disorders, do you see, is that like pretty common in clients that you get, people dealing with being gay and dealing with issues of identity? How common would you say that is in the gay community?
Oh my God. It's far more common than I think even my own community sees it, right? Or realizes it in their own lives. Because like I said before, it's this kind of surface idea that if I come out of the closet or I identify with this thing, this identity that has been marginalized, if I actually publicly identify with that, then I shouldn't have any shame and I shouldn't have any more issues. But of course, we know that that's not true. Shame isn't necessarily something that we can do away with entirely. It's something that we manage. It's just a normal kind of human emotion and experience in life. And so it's about managing it, but it's kind of like Brene Brown, who's kind of like a famous like shame researcher, and talks about vulnerability. She says that shame is like a fungus, that it can only exist in the dark. So when you start shedding light on it, that's how we start to kill it. So anytime that we're denying shame that we have in our lives, like, as a gay person, if I say, oh yeah, no, I don't have any shame about gay, well, then it's like a fungus in the dark. It's going to grow. It's going to have more power over you because you're denying it. And so it remains in the subconscious and you don't have an ability to work on it. But when we actually start to own it through vulnerability and say like, yeah, I feel like I'm not enough. Yeah, I feel like I kind of fuck up in relationships and I'm not doing it right. And I don't know how, to make one work. So I feel broken. That can be, at least in part, a product of the shame of growing up gay that tells me that, there's something. It
can be very
lacking.
empowering. Empowering to admit those things that, I mean, are very humanistic. I mean, all humans go through thoughts like that. So I just think, there is the shame around it. And I think in a society that's built from shame, or certain religions or, certain cultures are very much built on shame. And it makes sense from like a social construct, there's, like fitting in, all of that, that's all like social psychology. But I mean, it can be very damaging. So
yes.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, some people, I mean, I don't want to name the religions or the cultures.
Oh, this is what I'll say about that. I actually have a belief that most people and most things at their core are stem from love, are good, right? And so I actually believe that most religions come from this place as well. What I think is, anyway, so I'll say like, let's just say Christianity, right? Especially as a gay person, there in my community of queer people, there's a lot of triggering that happens when it comes to religion, because it's specific religions and like Christianity that says that being gay is a sin. And it's like, okay, cool. Fuck you, because I'm gay, so you're fucked up, I'm not, right? So there's like a lot of that stuff that can happen. But I still believe that at its core, something like Christianity is built on the foundation of love and kindness, and how that can become the metric for success in life and the tool for, kind of a meaningful life experience and all that kind of stuff. But what happens is that, spirituality kind of placed in this religious structure, that's a man-made thing, right? Like that's very human designed, which means it's inherently imperfect and it's kind of wrought with all kinds of complexities and kind of negativity that can be brought into it. And it kind of gets bastardized and different agendas. And, and a lot of people who are the most fear-driven also tend to have the loudest voices at times too. So what you hear from certain religions does not necessarily mean that that's an accurate representation of that particular religion. It just happens to be one sect of it who's kind of putting their own spin and interpretation on things. So that's what I would say.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts about that, though? What are your thoughts about the role of religion?
Like we mentioned earlier before.
Come on, Serena, this is the time to get vulnerable.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I am slightly existentialistic in my thinking. I am a self-proclaimed agnostic,
Yeah,
for a lack of better categorization. That's just because I don't know how to categorize myself.
sure.
So religion fascinates me. I actually thought about minoring in world religion, and I did take
Ah,
religious courses. I took a Bible study course in college, world religion course in college. So it's very fascinating to me because I think religion, philosophy, and psychology, those three things are very similar in so
yes,
many
I
ways, and
agree.
they all influence each other. And for me, a lot of religion is really just philosophical, like life philosophies that people follow.
100%.
But
Yeah.
it's when people, in my opinion, it's when people like follow it to the core and they're like, oh, there's no change. This can't change at all because it's
Yeah.
written in this scripture, you know.
It has been said.
Yes, exactly. And then you really have to question, well, who said it? And then if someone's saying a deity said it, it was like, well, but I mean, are you sure
Yeah,
about
show
that?
me the receipts. Show me the receipts. I don't trust it.
Right. And society changes, and that's my thing with it, is like, there is so much change that's happening all the time. So if something is written in stone, that stone
Hmm.
can't change, I mean,
Totally. Yeah. Well,
so what do you
I
do
think that's
then?
problematic in general. Anytime that anybody is holding anything to a rigid standard, especially when it comes to things like religion, it's like,
Hmm.
no, come on. All of this stuff is, it's like a soft science, right? It's like we're
Right, right.
throwing it out there with as a structure, but when we're leaning on it as if it's like the entire thing that is, 100%, it's black and white and you have to follow it. Okay, come on. That's like, no. Even something like mental health and psychology, psychology is a soft science, which
Yes.
means that there's a lot of kind of like there's gray area. So we're only throwing out theories here. We're kind of saying like this is what we believe. There's a lot of kind of research and data and information that really supports this, but nobody's going to say this is 100%. Like even in the
No.
medical community, that is a hard science. You will never have any research come up as 100% accurate. It's always going to be 99% because there always has to be some small window of a margin of error,
Well,
right?
that's the beauty of science, is that it changes. Is that it always says
Yeah,
like this is correct until proven wrong, but there's
yes,
room for it to be proven. In fact, the scientific community invites theories to be
exactly.
proven wrong,
Yes.
because then you learn more about it and then you discover more, right? So that's like, for example, the DSM, or textbooks in
Yep.
psychology.
Yeah.
They change. They're not the same. You can't get the same textbook from 10 years ago. You're going to be learning things
You're
that
gonna be
people.
outdated. Yeah.
Right, like, no,
Totally.
the psychology community no longer believes this anymore.
Homosexuality is not a mental illness.
Right.
Like, yes, exactly. We need to make
Right.
sure that these things are evolving, but it's
Or
just
like Sigmund
it's
Freud with the
yeah,
whole mother
all of
complex,
it.
and the
Yes.
horse,
Oedipus
horse
complex,
penises and
Electra
all that.
complex, all this
Yes, I have
nonsense.
to tell people, there's still some people who think that, because that's the stereotype. There's stereotype of
Yeah.
psychologists right
Yeah.
now. The stereotype is that, psychologists all believe in Sigmund Freud, and we blame everything on our mothers, and everything's a penis complex, and it's like,
Exactly.
no, that's actually, and I have to keep telling people, that's actually like, people don't really believe in that anymore.
Yeah. It's like not everything. Maybe some things are a penis complex,
Right,
but
right.
not everything.
Right.
Oh, it's interesting because I love this conversation specifically about the need for there to be a structure and things for us to lean on as information and as guides. But when it becomes so rigid, it's problematic. But I think that also really speaks to a very normal kind of human response to things, which is fear of change.
Yes.
We just as part of our survival mechanism, we need to rely on things being consistent and the same because that's how we know what to predict and how to prepare for things. So we're going to be okay. And being able to evolve beyond that thinking is
Mm-hmm.
what we need to do so that we then can move through our lives and make the changes that we need to and challenge our fears and being able to do that. But that's the reason why a lot of people cling to things is because they're just afraid of change. I mean, it's just that simple.
Do you think that's why hoarders hoard?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes, that's exactly why hoarders hoard because they project so much significance and meaning onto objects because they lack the ability to understand their own inherent worth. And so there's so much that's placed on these things, so many memories and stories and, kind of, who they came from or whatever it is. They rely so heavily on that to have a sense of worth and value that they hold on to it. They hoard things because they don't know how to reclaim their own love.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people can hoard traditions as well, you know, or
Absolutely.
mindsets. Yeah,
Yes.
that's very,
That's
very
right.
interesting
Or
analogy.
compliments. People can hoard compliments, right? It's so
Mm,
easy for people to be very critical, right? Like just thinking about like in a friend group or something, it's so easy to point out like, I don't know if you should have done that. Or I don't know, is that really the right idea? But when somebody's doing something really well or is really thriving, maybe those same people wouldn't necessarily kind of dole out the compliments and the praise, you know? So people hoard
right.
that as well because they're afraid then that they won't have enough of their own love. They have to make
Oh,
sure that they're holding
wow.
on to it. So it's so many different things that we can hoard.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love that we're going on all these different topics right now.
Yeah.
You know, I was just thinking about with the whole multicultural thing where we first started.
Yep.
You know, oftentimes I see mental health in general as almost like a multicultural identity. You know, people that obviously do experience mental health issues, which actually is, I mean, a lot of people, even diagnosed or not, we all have some type of mental health, something like just like physical health that we're working on, right?
Yeah.
But people that are diagnosed with more severe mental health issues, that's another culture. That's another minority culture
Yep.
that they feel. But it's actually not that minority because it's 1 in every 4 people in the world are diagnosed with a
Right.
mental health disorder at some point in their lives. I don't like the word disorder. I mean condition, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
and it's probably a lot more just because there's so many people that
Yeah.
don't
That's
go
only
to
what's
therapy.
reported. Right.
Right. So it could
Yeah.
very well be like half, could
Yep.
very well be half of the entire world population.
Yeah.
You know, who knows? But you know, in speaking about multiculturalism and mental health and just trying to like wrap everything, you know, together and with what you do and all of that, you know, how much like would you say that the clientele of the gay community that comes to you are
Hmm.
really struggling with another identity, another minority with mental health issues? I mean, does that go hand in hand? Like, does it, you know, do you think like having a gay identity like also increases the chances of having a mental health disorder?
I think that yes, it does increase the likelihood that they'll experience, you know, more mental health issues for sure, for the reasons that we've been
Conditions,
talking
yeah.
about.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I guess maybe a couple ways to answer that. One is that I think, and you were speaking to this also, is we really want to make sure that we're thinking of mental health in the same way that we think of physical health,
Hmm.
that we all have mental health, right? Like we all have our physical bodies that we need to either take care of or not take care of, but that's what's going to, you know, impact our, you know, functioning. Same thing with our mental health. Like we all have our mental
Right.
states and we have to make sure that we're checking in on that.
It's just
Um,
health, right?
it's just
Hmm.
health, right? So we all have it. It's all,
Right.
you know, you say mental health and you think like, oh, okay, yeah, he's bipolar, or oh yeah, okay, he's got, you know, dissociative
Right.
identity disorder or whatever. It's like
Right.
mental health is just the general state of our kind of mental well-being, right?
Right.
So, but then of course there are people who also do have more significant, you know, kind of disordered issues or, you know, kind of complex things that can come up in that front. And so when that is the case and there are, you know, kind of diagnoses and there's kind of more significant treatment that's happening, there absolutely can be a lot of shame around that because we live in a culture that tells us that, you know, you have to be, you know, you have to be okay. You actually shouldn't need anybody. You should be able to get through life on your own. And, you know, and if there's any kind of like major issues, then there's something broken with you. And it's like, no, there's,
Hmm.
right. There's all just different levels of
And that is
ability.
really not the case because human beings are social creatures and they've relied on each other like since the start of civilization. And if we didn't ask each other for help, we wouldn't be here today.
Exactly. It's so normal. It's so normal. But
Right.
that's the thing. It's like, it's so normal in the same way that you being Asian is normal and me being gay
Right.
is normal.
Right.
But we live in a world that for a variety of historical reasons, which maybe you read Cast and then you can have some insight into it. But these are social constructs that tells us that these things are not okay, that these things are wrong with you, that these things are less than. So when we understand that, right? So whether it's kind of more of like mental health, significant struggles, or race, or sexuality, or any of these kind of variety of multicultural identities and experiences, that when we start to be aware of that, and also what the society tells us or whatever larger culture tells us about that, that's going to impact how we see ourselves.
Well, do you think that it's mostly stemmed from shame then?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
Yes. I mean, listen, the world says, or at least this country says that, white is the standard, right? You're not seeing a lot of Asian representation in a lot of the media that you're watching, right? Okay, so that's telling you that white's the standard, you're less than, and so that's where shame comes from, this idea that I'm not enough, I'm less than. The world, same thing with me being gay. So it's like, I'm not seeing as much gay representation as I do straight, I'm feeling less than, and so yes, that's at least in part, one significant way that we experience shame. There's other things too, right? Like there are legitimate mommy and daddy issues, family issues that come up,
of course,
other kinds of bullying and peer issues, but this is one significant lens to look through it.
What about genetics also? The biological aspect of mental health. I mean, because my question is, do you think the mental health conditions that a lot of your clients have actually, do you think the actual conditions stem from shame? How much of it stems from shame?
Okay, so again, soft science, right? So nobody can kind of say anything definitively on this in any kind of like with specific statistics. But I would say that, it's the classic nature versus nurture, right? Like, are these things learned or are they, encoded in our genetics? And I would say that it's probably both. I think that maybe a lot of people would view that as a cop out, but I think that it's actually both.
No, it absolutely is both. Yeah.
I mean, we've got our genetic makeup and also our cultural and life experiences. Yeah. So it all shapes us.
Right. No, one of my favorite sayings that I remember learning in psychology is genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
So without the genetic predisposition, you don't have the bullets, but whatever happens in your environment may make whatever conditions come out,
Totally. Yeah. They influence each other.
How interesting. Yeah. Oh shoot. Oh my gosh. What was I going to say? I wanted to add, even though, I know you're calling it soft science and it's very well maybe, but just for our audience out there, psychology really does have a very strict research standard that is very much scientific and follows a scientific protocol. There's a hypothesis, you have to test it, there's all of that. And you have to like go through, your statistics, your learn all about your bell curves and standard deviations and, take a bunch of classes, and there's a ton of research being done around psychology all the time.
Yeah. So Serena, going to bat for psychology. It's legitimate.
Because that's another thing that we're trying so hard to break is the taboo around like psychology as something that is actually helpful or real or totally. Scientific.
Listen, and I fully appreciate and respect that. I also kind of come from the perspective that I don't think that like we need to even necessarily prove anything. You know what I mean? Like we don't have to really we don't really have to like dig in deep. I do appreciate that of making a very clear distinction for your viewers and listeners about it being a legitimate science that has a lot of work and a lot of research and everything that goes behind it.
You can't just publish, anything. I mean, if you're the test that you're doing, and that's why there's all the you have to like conduct very strict protocols when you're doing these psychological tests. Some people just don't realize that. They're like, oh, you can just go out and test some people and like say and call that psychology. It's like, no, that's not how it's done.
No, totally.
You don't know the amount of work and effort and the very strict things that go into this before you can actually publish a journal article that says we have found something. I've done a bunch of research before. I remember where like, they're required assignments, I remember in class. And unfortunately, a lot of them, we had no conclusive evidence. So there were things I wanted to prove that, we couldn't prove that we were.
Which is information though, right? That's still legitimate data that's getting put out into this kind of larger body of data, which is, I thought this one thing was going to happen, but it's coming up inconclusive. So it actually, this theory does not necessarily hold true, at least within the context of this experiment.
Right.
Absolutely, that's information too,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then also, you might have done something wrong as well. It might tell you something about your experiment that like you overlooked, right? That might have influenced. So psychology is so complicated,
but that's also life, right? It's kind of like in our own lives, we're constantly experimenting with things, and when things don't necessarily meet our ideal, we view it as a failure and we've wasted our time and it's no good. It's like, no, we get just as much from those quote unquote failures because we're learning what's not working and pointing us in a more, kind of a more accurate or effective direction. It's like, all of this stuff is good. All of this stuff matters.
Right. I don't even believe in failure, so.
Yeah, same. Me too.
Nice. Great mindset. Well, it's been lovely chatting with you.
It's been so nice.
Yeah, I just wanted to, wrap it up by, I always ask, are there any last words, advice, inspiration, anything that you want to say to our audience out there?
Listen, I would just say that every single person struggles with shame. So whether it comes from issues of genetics or whether it's issues within your family or whether it's, very likely a lot of multicultural issues and ways that you feel marginalized and not good enough through those cultural experiences and identities. We all have shame, and that is normal and that's healthy and that's okay. And the more that we are able to own it and also know what that voice of shame and kind of noise and static sounds like in our lives and have the ability to be vulnerable enough and courageous enough to share that, then that does take a lot of strength. And that is the way that we can start to feel better in ourselves and do more of what we want to do in life. So that would be my message.
Yeah. And also I love what you said about the feeling good enough, feeling like you're not good enough, and I think, I always say these challenges are part of what makes humans beautiful as well, because otherwise, the other side of the coin is like if we always felt complacent and like we were always good enough, we never get anywhere. Wait, I have one more question for you, Matt. I was
what's up?
This as you were talking.
Yes.
Really out there, like you might not have a straight answer for this.
Go ahead, I'll give it my best.
Okay, you talked a lot about love, right?
Yes.
Love. And I love it. I love the love.
meta love.
Yeah. But my question is, what is love to you?
Wow, big question. Okay, what is love to me?
What do you mean when you say that?
Okay, I think I would probably say this is probably a little bit more of a spiritual perspective on my part, but I guess I would say,
Matt,
kind of
as yourself.
So, kind of leaning back into something that I said earlier. I think that love is just the essence of who we are. And so I guess probably the best way that I can try to describe it is when we're feeling, when we just kind of feel like we can breathe and we're calm and it's funny. So a good friend of mine, Keith, he talks about his like Laurel Drive moment, which is in LA. There's Laurel Drive, right? It's kind of like cuts through the mountains from kind of the city area into the valley. And it's a beautiful drive. And he said, he was like, there was this one moment when I was visiting LA, because he lives in New York, when I was visiting LA and I had rented a convertible and I'm out here in, sunny LA and it's beautiful. And I was driving through Laurel Canyon and he's like, and there was like Enya playing on the radio. And I just felt like, I love Enya, right? It's so like soothing. And he was just like, and I looked around and I just took a deep breath and was just like, like it was just one of those fleeting moments where it felt like everything is okay. I would say that's like the perfect description of like the purity of what love is, knowing that everything actually is okay. Everything has its order, right? And so that to me is love. And so when I'm able to quell whatever fears and shame and feelings of inadequacy enough that I allow my heart to really show up as best as it can and to feel that and to then move through life in a loving way, not guided by fear and shame, then that's what I think helps grow and strengthen myself and also is the gateway to all the magic of the world, connecting with people in more meaningful ways, connecting with passion projects and interests and hobbies more, efficiently and authentically. And so that's probably the best kind of, shortest way I could describe what love is to me.
That's a beautiful, beautiful way to describe it. I love those feelings. I love it when you catch those feelings, and
same.
Yeah. And would you say that there's like many ways to catch those feelings? I mean, I know some people meditate just to like feel at peace and calm. And then I know sometimes I walk by the beach or I go on my daily walks and I feel that and I'm just like, or I listen to my affirmations or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, everything is great.
Everything's fine. I'm okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything
Definitely.
is beautiful. This world is amazing. I love that. Love.
Same. There are so many different ways of doing it. One of my favorites is actually gratitude journaling. I write
Yes.
like every morning I sit down and do my gratitude. I used to, when I first started about 7 years ago, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to write 5 things down. And eventually I'm like, why am I limiting myself? I'll just keep writing until I'm done. I easily can write 40, 50, 60 things down a day.
Wow.
Yeah, easily. And that's what helps. That's what helps promote the idea of abundance in my life and in the world, and then also within myself. And that's what helps calm me and not spin as much.
Okay. Well, what are 5 things to close it off? Let's leave our audience with 5 things that you're grateful for
5 things
today,
I'm grateful
and then I'll
for.
share 5 of mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't done this today yet. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Great. So it's like real-time activity. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say, I mean, come on. Number 1 is just being able to have this conversation with you. I think this is amazing. This is the first time that we're getting to have a real in-depth conversation, and I loved it. So
me too. That was mine too.
Top of list. So I would say that 1,000,000% my family, not just my given family that I was born into, but also a group of kind of mainly gay guys that I'm very connected to, and they're such an extension of my heart and what gives me like a real solid foundation in life. For sure, my health. For sure, the fact that my passion also doubles as my profession. Like, I fully recognize that that's a privilege, and I'm so grateful for that. And what else? I'm going to say cookies and ice cream.
You just threw that out
just
there.
Gotta keep it out there. Cookies and ice cream. Yeah,
no, that's
all
great.
Right.
Yeah, summer, it's really hot. Really, really good time for that.
Yeah.
Ice cream has been my quarantine food. Like,
it's my everyday food, but okay. Yeah. What about you? What are 5 things you're grateful for?
5 things I am grateful for. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have this really fun and amazing and in-depth and interesting conversation with you today, Matt. I'm glad that we got to do this. Secondly, I'm grateful for Breaking Taboo. I'm grateful for, all of the support that we have received. And I was just telling my team this yesterday, a couple of people on my team, but I'm like, you know what, it's the founder life type thing. It's really hard sometimes, and you do feel like you're alone, sometimes, and I know that's a human experience, everyone feels that sometimes, but as a founder, I think it's like, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, I'm doing so much and it's so lonely, but then like I have my team. So that's the 3rd thing I'm really grateful for is my wonderful, amazing team at Breaking Taboo that is like just so supportive of everything. And everyone out there that we're helping, I'm really grateful to have this platform as well. Fourthly, I am grateful for my health because this whole virus thing has really put that in perspective, I think. Never really thought of my health on such a daily basis in this way before. I mean, maybe my mental health, but I'm talking about my physical health now is what I'm talking about, as well as like just really paying attention to that and being more in tune. And then I think I have 5 more. So, I know. I really like these little, you get them at Trader Joe's.
Wait, what are they? Oh, biscotti?
Parmesan crisps.
No, Parmesan.
Parmesan crisps.
Listen, I love cheese and I love carbs, so I'm here.
It's so good. Oh my gosh, and I can't find these anywhere else but Trader Joe's. And
that's the magic of Trader Joe's.
Sometimes they're out of it, but last time they weren't, and I grabbed like a whole bunch, and I'm like, yes, I have my favorite snacks now. So
perfect.
Anyway, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you, Matt.
It's been so great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and have a wonderful day. And for all of our audience out there, thank you so much for watching. This is Matt Dempsey, who's a multicultural counselor and a psychotherapist.
Yes.
Yes, got it right. Yay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. We'll be in touch.
Thank you, Serena.
And it was really great chatting with you.
Same.